The Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union ruled over the various ethnic groups of Central Asia for centuries. Russia's century-long domination of Central Asia ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. However, still his huge influence over the 5 independent countries of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Having assumed the mantle of the Soviet Union, Russia long ago identified Central Asia as its sphere of influence. It is the only power that offers the Central Asian states a formal security guarantee under the auspices of Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, supported by a network of bases and radar installations throughout the region. Ethnic Russians still make up 5 to 20% of the population of Central Asian countries. Russian is one of the most official languages in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Even with the ongoing crisis in Russian economy, millions of workers from these countries find work in Russian Federation. Russian energy and mining conglomerates have a significant impact on the local economy. Central Asia, with its natural resources and geographical advantages, has always been a key element in the sphere of influence of many leading powers, and therefore China's interest in it is not new. This has always been associated with the issues related to the expansion of the country's territory, control over it, as well as territorial security. An indication of this complex interest is that official visits to the Central Asian republics since their independence have followed one another at a constant pace since the first visit of the Prime Minister Li Peng in 1994. Various Chinese dynasties have thought to spread their influence in the heart of Eurasia for millennia. Seeking to protect trade along the Silk Road from raids by nomadic pastoralists, the Han dynasty expanded into Central Asia over 2,000 years ago. But in 751 AD, the Abbasid Caliphate halted Chinese expansions at the Battle of Talas, near the current Kazakh-Kyrgyz border. In the modern era, China's economic influence in Central Asia is impressive. Since 1991, the volume of trade is increased more than 100 times and is more than $50 billion per year. While there is some tension between China and Russia due to the former's growing influence and the latter's diminishing region influence, huge Chinese investments continue to flow into Moscow's strategic backyard, which continues to maintain its influence in the Central Asian region, but due to ineffective government. Kremlin and tightening sanctions, Russia is forced to seek new allies, therefore becoming more dependent on China and gradually losing the spheres of influence. Today, Sino-Russian cooperation in Central Asia rests on 3 main factors: transnational Islamism, drug smuggling, and America's regional goals. With interethnic tensions and enormous economic potential added to the geopolitical mix, Central Asia is an important and dangerous crossroads for China's expanding global influence. Since China is under pressure from America and its allies in the Pacific, and Russia is under similar pressure in the West, the 2 powers have a mutual interest in keeping Central Asia free from strategic tensions and from outside influence from any third power. The Sino-Russian relationships in Central Asia remains one of cooperation precisely because of the perception of shared regional challenges. Moscow and Beijing are very aware of any American strategic projection into the resource-rich area and their borders. Beijing sees Washington pivot to Asia as an effort to check China's regional rise. Relations between Russia and America have devolved into open competition over conflict in Ukraine and resulting economic sanctions. Initially, concerns about the security of the People's Republic of China were based on the stability of Xinjiang, which was one of the main factors that shaped China's policy towards Central Asia. However, in reality, the problems of economic development and political control in Xinjiang are still far from being solved in this area, which was only formally integrated into the Qing Empire in 1884, in which still remains a dispute periphery for China. And an example of this is not only the 1997 incidents, but also the repeated incidents of 2008 and 2009. At the economic level, Xinjiang is in fact not only confronted with a differential in development that remains significant in relation to the national average, but even more destabilizing, with a persistent, not to say increasing, inequality between the population of Chinese Han origin, which today compromises almost 50% of the local population, and the indigenous population characterized ethnically and culturally by an identification with all the populations of Central Asia. China's strategy of control through occupation, which led to a significant increase in the population of Han descent, which increased from 6% of the total population of Xinjiang in 1949, numbered 300,000, to 40.6% of the total population of 7.5 million in 2000. This is the cause of discontent among Muslims, not only within the country, but also causes concern throughout Central Asia. It is clear to Beijing that control over Xinjiang also entails control over the periphery and cross-border contacts. Thus, while the central government has declared an official policy of establishing good relations with all new Central Asian republics, in 1996, the directive from the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party emphasizes the need to obtain promises from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan not to support the Uyghur or Kazakh independent movement originated in Xinjiang. This strategy is also based on a new concept of security and intended to promote mutual trust, equality, mutual benefits, and coordination, a kind of non-binding Chinese-style multilateralism. As far as Central Asia is concerned, this strategy of border stabilization has at the same time been translated by the concern in an initial period to resolve all of the frontier questions inherited from the Soviet era, in a sense rather more favorable to the new Central Asian republics, which Beijing wished to establish good relations. On these positive foundations, China then put in place a strategy of alliance against separatism, which has gradually taken more established form of the fight against the three forces of evil, represented by terrorism, extremism, separatism. These elements, which also appear as a response to the theme of the axis of evil preached by the United States in the early years of the millennium, have similarly incorporated a commitment on the part of the Asian republics not to support the separatist movement originating in Xinjiang. A commitment that ideally should lead to active cooperation in terms of repression and reputation of the separatist element thought by Beijing. This element was all more important as more than 400,000 Uyghurs settled in Central Asia, more than 300,000 of them in Kazakhstan alone, where family ties are close. Moreover, about a dozen Uyghur organizations are tolerant of Kazakhstan, despite the agreements they signed with Beijing. China has actually created a network of cooperation in the military sphere and to maintain police order. For China, in fact, it was a matter of breaking the obvious cultural, linguistic, ethnic and religious community between Xinjiang and the Central Asian republics in order to create, on the contrary, a community of interest related to the nature of ruling regimes between central authorities. But while strengthening the strategic ties between China and Central Asia, Beijing had to at the same time deny or minimize the natural and historic integration of Xinjiang with this entire region of Central Asia. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, created in 2001 and uniting the People's Republic of China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Russia, pursued precisely these goals in resolving border issues, reducing military tensions, and implementing confidence-building measures. On June 9, 2017, India and Pakistan became full members of the SCO. The total territory of the SCO member state is more than 34 kilometers squared. That is 60% of the territory of Eurasia. The total population of the SCO countries is 3,400,000,000 people as of 2015, half of the world's population. China's economy is the second largest economy in the world in terms of nominal GDP, gross domestic product. The first in terms of GDP in purchasing power parity since 2014. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, Central Asia did not play a significant role in relations between the United States, the USSR, and other powers in the region. The space, previously poorly studied by the Americans, began to really interest them since 1991. Since then, the United States has remained the only superpower whose interests penetrate all regions of the world, including Central Asia, where until recently they were one of the main players. Initially, the United States found it difficult to define clear priorities in the CAR. Washington was concerned about the threat of communism restoration in the post-Soviet space, which made it not encroach on Russian influence in the countries of the near abroad, with the exception of the Baltic states, in which Russia almost immediately lost all of its influence. In 1997, Washington declared Central Asian states to be a zone of its long-term strategic interest, and in March 1999, the US Congress adopted the Silk Road Strategy Act, which spoke of supporting economic and political independence of Central Asian countries that would reduce the United States' energy dependence on the unstable Persian Gulf. Staking on the development of the bilateral contracts with these countries of post-Soviet Central Asia, the United States obviously ignored the creation of 1996 of the Shanghai Five, prototype of the SCO. In general, the US attitude toward the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has gradually changed from passive observation of its activities to active interest, At present, it is widely believed among Western researchers that the SCO has an anti-American orientation and was created to counterbalance the blocs of the United States and Western countries. The initial attitude of the United States towards the SCO was characterized by passivity, practically minimal response to the development. At the time, the United States still considered Shanghai 5 as a structure whose activity did not pose any threat to its interest, but on the contrary, testified to the decline in Moscow's role in Central Asia due to the emergence of a new major player there, China. In addition, the original goals of the organization were consistent with those United States in the region. Washington welcomed any steps aimed at weakening the threat of Islamic extremism, reducing the potential for conflict, and achieving stability in Central Asia. Therefore, at the official level, the United States did not pay special attention to the Shanghai 5. But already in the late 1990s, many analysts expressed concern about the rapprochement between Russia and China, accusing President Bill Clinton of underestimating the danger of concluding treaties and supplying arms to China. Despite the fact that the SCO positions itself as a regional organization that builds its policy on the positions of maintaining security in Central Asia and the rest of the world, some Western researchers emphasize the obvious opposition of the organization to NATO countries, in particular to the United States. Analyst Zhao Husheng stressing that the SCO does not have an anti-American orientation, at the same time cites facts showing that both Shanghai 5 and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization were created during the period of the greatest aggravation of relations between America, China, and Russia. And further evidence was a declaration adopted on July 5, 2005 in Astana at the SCO summit with an appeal to the United States to determine the timeline for the withdrawal of American bases from Central Asia stationed in the area, in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, to support the actions of American troops against Taliban regime in Afghanistan. The response to the Astana Declaration was a resolution adopted on July 19, 2005 by the House of Representatives of the US Congress, expressing concern over the SCO statement, which was regarded as an obvious attempt by China and Russia to push the United States out of this region. Shortly thereafter, Uzbekistan said that the Americans will have to leave the base at Kashir-Khanabad in territory for 6 months. These steps prompted a series of responses from high-ranking officials on both sides, which served as a starting point in official relations between SCO and the United States. In October 2005, US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice visited Kyrgyzstan and agreed with President Kurmanbek Bakiyev to transfer the American contingent from Uzbekistan to the Gansi Air Base, formerly the Manas Air Base in Kyrgyzstan. In February 2009, the Kyrgyz side announced its intention to close the air base, Manas, referring to the US refusal to discuss the issue of increasing rent for the base. A few days later, the parliament approved the decision of the Kyrgyz government. In March 2009, the ban on the use of the airbase was extended to 11 other countries, allies of the United States. If we talk about the European Union in its present form, the EU does not represent such a monolith as it was Europe of 9 or Europe of 15 at the beginning of its journey. This is true for both foreign policy and the domestic policy of a united Europe. In connection with the development of the situation in the field of cooperation with the countries of Central Asia, the following scenario will most likely be implemented. The establishment of bilateral ties, with the investment of national campaigns in Germany, by example, are following in the wake of the foreign policy of the United States. At the moment, the EU has not worked out a clear line aimed at a partnership with the SCO and Central Asian countries, although most likely with the understanding of this gap is obvious. 20 years ago, the United States supported China's entry into the World Trade Organization. At the time, the economy of the PRC was in very poor state, and due to the stupidity of then negotiators, it received an indefinite status of a developing country in the WTO. This status allowed the Chinese to exclude imports from Europe and the United States in order to boost their production. At the same time, Chinese goods were delivered to any market in the West, particularly duty-free, and the communist elite in Beijing took advantage of this. China has built the world's second largest industry. While US companies spend billions of dollars developing the latest technology, China has the ability to sell replicas of the same technologies at much lower prices, but without multi-billion-dollar costs. All this is directly related to the increasing scandals around the activities of the Chinese special services, which put on stream the theft of Western intellectual property, developments, technologies, with the further accelerated establishment of the production of these technologies in their country. At the same time, foreigners are seriously restricted from starting a business and trade in China. According to the approved economic policy of Beijing, a foreigner is obliged to take a Chinese partner as a companion and disclose to him all the technological secrets of the production of goods that he imports or produces. Chinese authorities force foreigners to disclose secrets to a partner who often works for the Chinese intelligence service. Beijing receives confidential information and immediately passes it on to its manufacturers, who use American technology to produce the same goods. Moreover, according to the democratic policy of the United States and other Western countries, a huge number of Chinese get the opportunity to study in American universities and in European universities. Chinese people make up nearly a third of all foreign students studying at American colleges and universities. In 2017-2018 academic year, more than 360,000 Chinese students were enrolled in the United States alone. As it turned out later, thousands of them were not students at all, but employees of the main intelligence director of the General Staff of the People's Liberation Army of China and the Ministry of State Security of the PRC. The American visas have already been revoked from thousands of so-called students who managed to study in many fields with diplomas in their hands and now engage in espionage. Not even ready-made developments, but what of American scientists and specialists are working on in laboratories. That is, the theft of American developments is already underway at the earliest stages. The FBI found several thousand such spies, Chinese citizens in the United States. President Trump decided to end it all, and during Xi Jinping's visit to the United States, he was specifically asked that the Chinese authorities end the theft of the intellectual property, waive the requirement to disclose technological secrets, and end fraudulent trade. China imports $550 billion a year in goods to the United States, but only allows $200 billion. The Chinese do not let in $350 billion worth of US goods every year. The Chinese authorities promised America that they would correct all of these imbalances, but returning to Beijing, they happily forgot about all of the agreements. For 2 years, the American administration admonished Beijing to eliminate all of these problems, but the PRC continued to act in the same spirit. After that, the United States was forced to impose significant custom duties on Chinese goods. At first, this concerned goods worth $200 billion and then another $50 billion. Next year, duties will be introduced for the remaining $250 billion. Thus, Chinese goods will become uncompetitive in the US market, and the United States will import goods from Vietnam, Cambodia, Mexico, Poland, and other countries that are not subject to 20% duties like Chinese. Apparently, Beijing wanted to arrange endless negotiations and during this time to continue conduct unfair trade with the United States in steel technology. And although in the end Trump pushed Beijing and the first part of the agreement was signed, but then the Chinese froze these commitments. And it was at this moment that the coronavirus pandemic began, which made the world community think about the true causes of the destructive virus. The Chinese behaved more than strangely, deceiving the world community and claiming that COVID is not transmitted from person to person. USA and Europe woke up only when terrible epidemic began on their territory. If the Chinese had informed about the powerful contagiousness of the virus 2 to 3 months earlier, the world community could have avoided so many victims. Defectors from China, including those who worked in the Wuhan laboratory, took with them documents that clearly showed that the Chinese government had been deceiving the whole world throughout this time. After all of this, the American administration finally lost all confidence in the Chinese authorities and decided to establish production of everything necessary inside the United States, as well as completely withdraw American companies from China, introduce tax incentives for them, pay for travel, etc. At the same time, high duties will be imposed on all Chinese goods. The production technologies of which the Chinese KGB stole from the United States, Israel, and other Western countries. Finally, the US will encourage other countries to move their companies out of China as well. The September 11 attack played into the hands of China in the best possible way, which tried to regain the upper hand by joining that seemingly common theme of the fight against terrorism for the initial period. This topic actually allowed Beijing to stand out from the axis of evil countries to which China has always been close, while at the same time insisting on the recognition of its own analysis of the terrorists and separatist threat in Xinjiang. The success of this strategy can be found in the fact that Washington has added ETIM, East Turkestan Independence Movement, to its list of terrorist organizations, which is nevertheless very marginal. This highlighting of a strategic interest shared in common with the United States. However, this has not produced the expected results for Beijing, in particular as far as Central Asia is concerned. According to China, the theories of regime change set in motion through the intermediary of certain NGOs supported by the United States, who praise especially the emergence of independent media, promoting the expression of opposition, have in contrast been reinforced. It became clear to Beijing that in accordance with the domino theory, these destabilizing movements would spread throughout Central Asia and reach Xinjiang Autonomous Region. Thus, China to a large extent decisively confirms its ideological specificity, that despite the policy of economic reforms pursued by the regime for more than 25 years, Beijing demonstrates a kind of complicity with the Central Asian regimes that arose with the participation of the former Soviet nomenclature. In the face of an offensive from the United States, China has successfully demonstrated remarkable adaptability and reincarnation. Beijing very quickly carried out an ideological restructuring in an attitude towards the totalitarian regime of Central Asia, trying to oppose common interests to the strengthening of the power of the United States and the threat of regime change. Beijing's goal was to reduce the influence of the United States in the region, creating a new rationale for an alliance with the Chinese regime. Russia played an excellent role as a mediator in this process, and today for Beijing, the return of a strong Russia to Central Asia is no longer considered a positive movement. As a result of the patient bypass strategy, which emphasizes Chinese-style soft power during the SCO summit held in Astana in July 2005, China and Kazakhstan signed a strategic partnership agreement based in part on Beijing's strong support principle of political stagnation in contrast to principle of regime change promoted by the United States. The emphasis was placed on the common struggle of all SCO members, not just in the case of the United States, only against terrorism, but against terrorism, separatism and extremism, which today is the most beneficial mechanism for all authoritarian regimes in Central Asia in the fight against dissent in their own states. China's policy towards Central Asia are increasingly showing adaptability, flexibility and pragmatism, which contrasts with its policies towards Taiwan, for example. Aside from seeking alliances with authoritarian states that share Beijing's distrust of the regime change strategies pioneered by the United States, there is virtually no ideological dimension in relation between China and Central Asia. Since the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) was announced in 2013, China's expanding economic, geopolitical and business presence around the world demonstrates its desire to play a greater role in international governance and legal systems. Since the Chinese model is focused on enhancing its own economic growth, he has no real intention to change the governance political regimes in the BRI countries. Unlike the West, Beijing pays little attention to market reforms, freedoms of speech, good governance, and transparency in the region, viewing calls for such principles as potentially harmful and destructive to the current political status quo. Turkmenistan is rightfully one of the largest energy powers. The reserves of natural gas here are more than 20 trillion cubic meters. Oil about 20 billion tons. In 2017, Turkmenistan confirmed its status on the world stage with a significant event in its scale, the presidency of the Energy Charter Conference. This honorary status was unanimously awarded to Turkmenistan in November last year as one of the world's most carbon-rich countries. The State Oil and Gas Development Program aims to increase the annual production of natural gas to 250 billion cubic meters, of which 180 billion will be available for export. According to official sources, foreign companies currently account for about 56% of oil production and 28% of gas. As of 2016, about 40 enterprises with the participation of Chinese capital operated in Turkmenistan. About 70 investment projects were registered, totaling more than $4 billion and RMB 2.3 billion. Companies from China are represented in the oil, gas and telecommunications sectors, transportation, agriculture, textile, chemical and food industries, healthcare and construction. All of these indicators are only on the outer shell of Beijing's policy in the region. In fact, the situation is aggravated by corruption scandals and the lack of transparency in agreements between Chinese and regional companies of Central Asian republics. Informal connections with decision makers allow Beijing to promote its interests in the region effectively and resolve commercial issues. The main conduits for Chinese interests in Central Asian countries are the elites, decision makers and their associates, senior officials and major businessmen. The modernization of the Bishkek power plant is an obvious example of such policy and the problems arising in this regard. In January 2018, at the height of winter, there was an accident at the only Bishkek CHP, which was recently modernized by the Chinese company TBEA. An investigation into the accident showed that various Kyrgyz officials lobbied for the interests of Chinese companies, and that 90% of the materials purchased to modernize the plant were purchased, including at inflated prices. This turned the accident into a political scandal, which was used by supporters of Presidents Soronbay and Berkov to get rid of the associates of his predecessor, Almazbek Atambayev. And of course, no lawsuits were filed against the Chinese companies that performed the work. A similar scandal erupted in Kazakhstan over the construction of the transit light rail work transport in Astana. But unlike the Bishkek scandal, only 15% of the project was implemented in the Kazakh capital, while the funds were stolen and the Chinese side held accountable. The investigation into the scandal was completed at the end of January 2020, and the former deputy mayor of the capital Nur-Sultan, then Astana, Kanat Sultanbekov, was named among the main suspects. Also, according to media reports, in Tajikistan, China, known for its gold, paid the president's son-in-law Shamsullo Sakipov $2.8 million for a gold mining concession. Beijing is well aware that the institutions in Central Asia as well as in Russia are playing a purely decorative role and have no real power. That is why China has long and reliably used these proven methods, which are similar to their methods in Africa, where today more than 70% of the African continent is already under the economic pressure of the Celestial Empire. According to the Carnegie Center, about 1.5 million ethnic Kazakhs, 180,000 ethnic Kyrgyz, 50,000 ethnic Tajiks, and 10,000 ethnic Uzbeks live in Xinjiang, which borders Central Asia. Among those arrested and sent to the re-education camps in China, and there are also citizens of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. For several years now, their relatives have been holding frequent pickets at Chinese embassies in Bishkek and Nur-Sultan. Today, many well-known political scientists and specialists in Central Asia are cautiously trying to assert that anti-Chinese protests that periodically flare up in various cities of Central Asia, and especially actively in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, are not yet proof of general xenophobia. However, in our opinion, and the opinion of many progressive activists living in this region, the world community today too underestimates China policy and the possible consequences of this influence in the near future, including on the policy of their own state. Even if we refer purely to Turkmenistan, then despite the economic integration proclaimed by China, the situation in this republic is getting worse every day. Today, the Turkmen nation has developed a paradoxical situation when more than half of the inhabitants of our country were forced to leave the republic in search of food or to study. But due to the formal reason with the coronavirus and the closure of borders, few people have the opportunity to get back home. However, Chinese personnel on the line of the pipeline under construction continue to freely enter and leave Turkmenistan. Moreover, according to our information, China plans to deploy more than 1 million of its personnel along the entire length of the pipelines in all of Central Asia republics, and satellite images around the compressor stations, where Chinese companies periodically expand the space for construction of new camps for housing for their staff. The dictatorial regime of Berdimuhamedov brought the country to complete impoverishment, stealing people's money with impunity and taking it out of the republic. The country is in a deep economic crisis, and even with farming is impossible since 90% of the arable land has fallen into disrepair due to soil erosion, a lack of specialists, and the incompetent leadership of the existing regime. The psychology of any dictatorship, first of all, always focuses on personal interests, ignoring the interests of the nation and the state, and that is why dictators are not able to see in time the depth and the scale of impending threat. And that is why, precisely, we, the Turkmen nation in exile, against our will, call on the entire world community to turn to face us and hear our voices. And while we still exist, we urge everyone to take advantage of these voices of ours and jointly do everything possible to correct the situation in order to avoid further disastrous consequences for your countries, including we, the Turkmen people, opposition, and many of our activists around the world are going to initiate a national referendum procedure, which still has a legal basis in Turkmen electoral code. Our only demand will be to change the existing presidential government to a parliamentary system of leadership in the country, when the fate of our country will be decided not by one person or one family, but by the whole nation. We call on all countries of the world to strengthen and spread this precedent on example of our nation as a domino effect, to enable every nation and every person to live on this planet in accordance with God's and general human principle of peace and prosperity. Do not forget that helping now the Turkmen nation in gaining freedom, you first of all help yourself in the future of your own nation.